feels like there's this kind of inferiority complex a lot of the time of like Pueblo's a bad place to live and like that's it. And you know, like our school is like really trying to like turn itself around, but there's this whole thing of like, so many times I get a kid, I'll say like, okay, can you please stop doing that? And they'll be like, oh, are you going to send me to the office? Because like, I'm a bad kid, so I should go to the office. So I think it's important to think about like, there's a lot of tensions in class that we were talking about last week and culture and all of those things. And I think that kids can get kind of like stuck into a story. And so I was really struck by this idea of how to break free from that story and how to sort of allow kids to share what they feel like they want to share. And the other thing that I just had a question just about the family thing that I don't know if now is a good time to share it, but I think that there's a lot of students, I have a lot of students whose families are like really in sort of tough situations who like their families barely have time to take care of them. So I'm not really sure how to like bring them into the education because like a lot of them are sort of like in and out of their parents' care because they're like in prison or that kind of thing. So like, how does that work with this family-centered thing is my question.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And obviously there are families where it's easier and they have more availability to be active in the educational process. I think like thinking about the definition of bringing the family in, does that mean that they actually have to be there, or is there a way that you could bring in some sort of artifact about the family, even if it's just a picture or something important? It could even be like an object. But at some point, just knowing that whatever the students can internalize, whatever they have to hold on to that family, you can value that and have them bring that into the classroom. But you're right. And is that the right thing to do week 1 or week 2, month 1, maybe even year 1? I don't know. But it's something to be thinking about when you see spots that you can honor that family's history, maybe honor, the community's assets it has to offer. And then if you can maybe create a bridge where community members or family members can make it into your classroom, either physically or some part of them, something they did or some memory or some legacy. There's various ways to do that, but you're right. And specifically, so Eliza's school within it, when you're standing in front of Eliza's school and you sort of look to the west, on top of that hill, you can see a variety of prisons. There's like the women's state penitentiary. There's the state mental hospital, where I believe the Aurora theater shooter is interred.
Yeah, that's correct.
Right. And then there's like a military boot camp for kids that's sort of a different approach. And I might be missing a few others. But the fact is, when those students step out of that school, they're seeing the school to prison pipeline directly in front of them. They're seeing a lot of bad things. And you're right, maybe their parents are in one of those facilities. And as an educator, that's a whole heck of a lot of weight to battle. And through this reading, this video, what we're doing in Aspire, I'm not asking you to come up with the answers, the solutions now, but just knowing that the kids have this type of depth, this type of complexity to their stories is good to know just exactly how to leverage it. I don't expect you to know that right now. I don't know if anyone does, but I think it'll help make those decisions moving forward. But great questions, Eliza. I appreciate that. Would anyone else like to share? I'd love to hear from everybody if you're willing to share. If you're not willing to share, that's cool. But if you'd like to share, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, so you still can't see me. But I kind of wrote about this last week in our little gallery walk.
Uh-huh.
But I love the TED Talk, the one side of the story, how we only hear one side of the story sometimes. One of my students shared with me the other day that she and her mom and dad and sister and brother all live in a 2-bedroom apartment. She shares a room with her brother and sister, and that's all she's ever known. And she talked about how the guy upstairs keeps threatening to call child services on them because, that's not okay, 3 kids in a room. But that's all she's ever known, and that she wouldn't have it any other way because she feels safe with them, and that's what their family is, and that's what they've been. And it's just a really interesting perspective of, here in America, we try to put our idea of what's right onto someone else. But in a lot of cultures, even across, not in the U.S., that's pretty common that you share a room, right, with siblings. But that we just have this one side of the story to where we see, 5 people in a 2-bedroom apartment, that's bad. Those kids don't have a good house, or don't have a good life, without really seeing their stories. So that really struck me. I loved the TED Talk as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. And, being a mandated reporter can sometimes put you in a position, and not that you have to mandate report that thing, but I was thinking about, some experiences I had as a teacher, and the more knowledge sometimes it puts you in a tough position of making a judgment or passing along information or helping author a story that maybe you don't want to author. And
Right.
taking the time to figure out what is the real context, what's the real story, while also balancing that very important role we have, both as a mandated reporter and mentor, friend, mother, father, all the roles that a teacher plays. That's a great point, Janelle. I appreciate that. Anybody else like to share?
Hi.
Hey.
Listen,
Melissa.
we have a meeting at school, so we're like,
Right.
let's do this at school.
Yeah.
I was going to say that I used the transcript from the TED Talk in my high school crew today
Awesome.
in preparation for our Socratic seminar this week, our first Socratic seminar. And just in talking with the kids as they're getting ready for it, it was interesting to hear how they think about that, like a multifaceted story. They're already kind of feeling like people are telling a story about them. And so it's interesting from their perspective as high school kids advocating for themselves. They're really working on that and working on crafting a new story, because a lot of kids that are at our school, their situations didn't work at other schools, and that's why they're here. So it's just interesting to see how that will work out in the family-centered approach, and how we don't know yet how it'll work out because we're just building it. So just interesting. But that's what, after I saw that TED Talk, I'm like, oh, this is what we're going to lead with. So what story are we telling about other people in this new environment?
That's great to hear. It's great to hear you're already sharing that with students. I also shared that TED Talk and its transcript with students, and it's really cool to see that. And it's cool because Eliza was doing an Elements of Culture deal today tied to her social studies curriculum. And Teresa, if you wouldn't mind sharing, would you share your activity, the game you were playing, and how you sort of address stereotypes within that game? I thought that was a pretty cool idea.
Oh yeah, sure. So right now I'm teaching my students how to make inferences, since that's something that they'll be doing throughout the school year with the text that we'll be reading. And so there was a need for some USA geography review. So yesterday we did a map together, and then we talked about like different regions, like the Southwest, the Northwest, the West. And then today what I did was I gave quotes like, I live in Pueblo, what region am I from? And so the answer would be the Southwest, and then they would have to cite evidence or what word kind of backed up that reasoning, and the word was Pueblo. And so one of my quotes had to do with the South or the Southeast, and it was like, I love to eat barbecue. And so they knew that it was the South or the Deep South. And then the next slide was like addressing what a stereotype is. And that was, in the South, a lot of people eat barbecue, but not everybody eats barbecue. And so some students gave some examples throughout the day, some of which I wish they were a little bit better. But yeah, so we kind of talked about stereotypes in that sense while talking about how to make an inference, and then kind of contrasting between the two and kind of acknowledging when it's appropriate and not appropriate.
Yeah. I thought that was that was cool that it both addressed, these elements of culture and inferences we can make about certain people, but doing that too much or going to that well too often, like you said, can result in stereotype, result in a single story, flatten that person's experience. I thought that was really interesting today.
Oh, thanks.
Cool. Anybody else want to share anything about the readings or the video from this week and what we did last week or anything else?
I'll share. One of the things that I really took from especially this reading this week is the benefits to the students from doing this family-centered, and us taking the time to understand their background and their culture can help them in the classroom because they don't feel so different than their classmates. They can learn to appreciate those differences. And I think that that's definitely something that we talked about last week, was taking the time to get to know our students, build those relationships, and understand where they're coming from. And the text that we read this week was a direct relationship of how that's a benefit to the student's success in school. So that's what I liked about it.
Right. Well put. That's hard work. Like, I mean, thinking of all the students you teach and thinking to know each of their individual contexts, each of their challenges and their strengths intimately probably seems pretty daunting now. And it may seem daunting throughout the year, but if you can move the dial with a few, it can make a big difference, even if that's all you can accomplish. But great thoughts. Anyone else want to share?
So
I'll share. Sorry,
sorry.
Dane.
You can go ahead first.
Okay. Go ahead, Courtney.
Okay. Well, one of the little assignments that I had the students do the very first day of school was just to write a brief paragraph about themselves, and if there was something in particular that they felt I needed to know that would help them, in the classroom, if there was anything that they struggled with, if there was anything that they felt they really excelled in. So I didn't want to concentrate just on the negative, but, also the positive. And if they just felt, anything, I ensured them I was the only one who was going to be reading it. So they could just feel free to open up and let me know. And I actually had quite a few students who admitted, they struggled with reading. They struggled with comprehending any of the information that they read. Some of them struggled with writing, struggled with spelling. And being able to have that information now, I can, it helps me when it comes to being able to teach them, being able to grade their homework, knowing that they struggle in that certain area. And one in particular, he's missing a few assignments. We are on our third week into, we're on our third week into school, and he's missing 2 assignments that he just hasn't turned in, and it's caused him to fail in the class. Well, I was able to get an email from her or the student's parents today, and she explained a lot about just some of the issues that the student struggles with. And so now that's opened my eyes to see, okay, why has he not turned these assignments in? And it has to do with the areas that he struggles in and just some personal issues that he has. So I really enjoy it when parents are actually involved in the students' education. It helps out a lot, because now, my first impression was like, oh, okay, you typically think, oh, this kid's lazy, he's just not wanting to turn his work in, he's not wanting to finish it. But in this situation, it's just completely the opposite of that. And so I think that helps out a lot, being able to know, I don't know his full backstory, I just know a little bit, but it helps me understand him better when it comes to his work and working with him in the classroom.
That's great. I love that, because you led with curiosity instead of judgment, and then you responded in kind with empathy instead of something else, right? So you wanted to find out the full story. You could empathize, you could connect. Now you have more information that you can leverage in the future.
Right.
Yeah. As opposed to, like, you might think your snap judgment would be to come down on the kid, maybe break the relationship. And then would you ever have what you have now, let alone what you're going to have in the future, having such a relationship?
Yeah.
Cool. That's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Justin, sorry to navigate the traffic jam there, but I'd like to hear from you as well.
Yeah, sure. No problem. The major thing that stuck out to me from the reading was just the idea of how the student is kind of the center of so many different layers of community, and at the furthest layer being like the entire ecosystem as a whole. That, I guess that's what they called it. And I was thinking about how that's just helpful for me as a teacher that just recently moved here from California, to be aware and be open to what are the pillars of that community, the pillars of that ecosystem that are the main supports for the student, whether it's the family and like the most inner circle, or even like other groups and resources and things that students have outside of school that are often so important to their success. And I know, like, with working with high schoolers in San Diego, like, sometimes it just takes like one of those kind of foundational communities or relationships for like the student to have enough support to succeed in school. So yeah, I think as a new teacher, I'm trying to keep my eyes open for those resources and what this place is like and what students have and what they don't have outside of the classroom.
Gotcha. And you're in Colorado Springs, right?
Yeah.
Also a very interesting community with various stakeholders all across the spectrum of values and politics. And that's a fascinating place to be open to all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Becca, I don't want to put you on the spot. If you want to share something, you certainly can. But I also don't want to move on and silence you if you have something you want to share. But you don't have to if you don't want to.
I'll share. I just wanted to make sure everyone talked.
Gotcha. The last voice. That's great.
So, like other people, I'm in Pueblo, and Pueblo doesn't have the best reputation in Colorado, and people are very vocal about it. I'm also on the east side of Pueblo, which is gang side, and where I'm at is Risley. And even in the community, if you say you're teaching at Risley, they're always like, oh. If you go to Risley, they are just like, oh. And they always have this one story about themselves or about that side, and then they take on that story for themselves. They're like, oh, okay, I'm just going to be in a gang and not care about school because that's what we're supposed to do because we don't have good testing scores and it doesn't matter. And they just have that attitude about it where it's just like they just get told all the time in various ways that where they're at has already decided things for them and what's happening. And where you go to school decides how things are going to go. And my admin is very conscious of that and what we need to be doing to help them appreciate themselves and understand where to get their opportunities. And it doesn't always mean you have to like leave your community. It doesn't mean your community's bad because they're a tight-knit community. They take care of each other and they care about each other. So we do this thing every morning that's called Good Things, and you do it in every hour. And you have 3 to 4 people share, and they just tell you something good that's happened. Because in their mindset, they're always just like, everything is awful and everything's against me. There's no reason for me to try. And they're just always so bogged down in school and just not wanting to be there. And it's that first 5 minutes of class where they share something good that's happened to them, no matter what it is. And then we all celebrate that they've shared something, like with a clap or snaps or whatever it might be. And it's an effort of my school, and like there's a bunch of other things we're doing, but I'm going to talk about it. But that's just every time to get them in that habit of looking for what's good and where you're at. And then also making us aware of who they are as kids because they share personal stuff. Like they'll share that they're excited it's Friday, but they'll also be like, yeah, my dad got home from Mexico today. I haven't seen him in a really long time. Like, and they'll just share things that are just personal and like little snippet good things. And like I ask them a question about it and then we'll celebrate. And it's just to start our class and have them have that moment and that conscious thing. Like, okay, take a minute, think about something good that's happened. And let's talk about it. Because everyone's just always telling them everything bad that's happening in their lives.
What type of reaction do you see from them? And then conversely, like what type of reaction do you sort of get? Like, I mean, obviously being a teacher, you teach a lot of periods. You don't have much time to think, to breathe, to eat, to go to the bathroom. And like to hear these good things, what effect does it have on you? What effect do you see it have on kids to share that?
I think it helps me just take that deep breath because like with teaching and where I'm at in a turnaround school and an IB program, like there's so much stuff that they're pushing on you. And I never feel like I have the time I want to focus on my kids, on who they are. So it's just that snippet where that's all I'm focusing on. I'm not doing anything else. I make eye contact. I'm asking them a backup question. Like, so we have that conversation and I feel like it just makes it better and they get excited and you can see just that moment of them relaxing. Like they'll tense up again when we have to start doing math because they hate it. But they have that moment and it's just better for all of us and they'll ask me questions. Or like sometimes if there's not, like if people aren't sharing, they go, Miss, you share something. and they want to know about me. And I try to give them their moment of their time and then offer something to myself, because my kids, like, in the area you're in, you earn people's trust. You're not just giving it. And so I'm always trying to share something personal about myself in that moment too. So they feel more comfortable to share, and they also know me more. And I'm not just a random person from Alabama.
Sure. Did you find that hard the first time? Like sharing about yourself?
It's kind of weird. Sometimes, I mean, it's silly, but like, they're only 12 and 13. And sometimes you're just like, oh my gosh, they're all just staring at me like I'm a weirdo. And it's fine, but it's weird sometimes, and they get into it. And like when they ask you questions about yourself or they remember something about you, like, it gets way easier, but it definitely was hard the first couple things. And also too, because it's a structured time in a way where I'm like, okay, let's share good things. And it doesn't always feel natural when you're just first into that to have that like phrase and talk about it in that way and just have that dedicated time. So that was kind of weird, but it was, I mean, they're good kids. I mean, people say things about them, but like, they're not going to be mean to me, and they ask me questions, and most of the time they act like they care, even if I'm not sure if they do, but they act like they care. So I feel like it's gone really well, and it's helped our whole entire classroom environment. And I just have had them come in and just be like, Miss, your class is chill. I just feel relaxed when I come in here. And I'll be like, oh, that's wonderful. I'm glad.
That's great.
So I feel like it's good for my classroom environment.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. I noticed that good things I was probably in 8 classrooms in the last 2 days. I've noticed that good things, I think, in at least 3 of them. And I might not have been there for the right time in other classes, but I really like that is a thing that seems to be a trend, at least in the schools that I saw, to take a minute, pause. My wife teaches 3rd grade math, and she always plays Shaka Khan's Tell Me Something Good, and does the same thing. So it's pretty cool. That's good to see that. All right. I would like to dig a little bit deeper with the ecological systems theory, the Bronfenbrenner stuff. And let me grab my slides here real quick. All right. We'll do that in a minute. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why we're doing this. But as I'm doing this, if you want to start thinking, I would love for you to have a student in mind, if you're comfortable with one, if you feel like you know one that you've spent some time with this year, that you feel like you could sort of dig into their life, what you know of it. Or if you have like a niece or nephew or friends who have a kid, or if you have a kid yourself, or if you would even like to explore yourself as a kid, just kind of think about that a little bit. But I want to think about all the things that are at play. We're going to do an activity with that. But be thinking about that for the next few minutes as I sort of set up what we're going to be doing. Cool. So last week I left it pretty open-ended at the end. There wasn't a lot of takeaways. Why are we learning about culture? And I think it was a good way for us to do that work up front, to understand ourselves and to understand how we're different from our kids and how our kids are different from each other. And then I think we can really apply that to the ecological systems theory, which has you look at a kid and really contextualize every single piece in that kid's life, or at least what you know or what's relevant to you as an educator. And to do that, as Adichie says, so often in education, kids' stories are flattened, right? We only allow them to tell their stories in the brief time they're allowed to talk in class, or in a very like controlled narrative writing assignment, or in some other way that's very short, maybe very surface level. But once we get under the skin a little bit and know more about that kid, like many of you so eloquently said in your paragraphs that you shared just a minute ago, we get to know some more about the kid, and it deepens it, right? It makes us empathize, it makes us curious, it makes us better understand. And I think like Charisse pointed out, or somebody, I'm not sure who said it exactly, but when a student feels comfortable in class, they're able to share, they're able to learn, they're able to feel accepted, their basic needs are met, so then you can talk about academics. And so I want to look into that a little bit more. Just that idea that we're always looking to deepen, right? We're not looking to stereotype our kids. We're not looking to take them only at face value. One issue I had while teaching was judging a kid either by what their teachers the previous year had to say about them. There's clearly single stories that get written by every kid's journey throughout the education system, or by siblings. You know, I had a number of siblings who had sisters who crushed it, were valedictorians, were great students, and maybe they were different. Maybe they didn't learn in the same way. Maybe they weren't as well behaved. Maybe they didn't think in the same ways. And teachers are forever comparing siblings to each other. Those are just 2 small examples of teachers crafting a single story of students you're going to teach, and then their siblings sort of co-crafting a single story with the teachers. But both of those are detrimental to the student. Both of those are detrimental to our relationships with the student and the way that we teach and the way that students learn. So to do that, I want to open this up. Again, there's not going to be like a takeaway. There's not going to be like an answer like, hey, go deepen your students' experiences tomorrow. Like that's not something you can just do and implement, right? But I want you to think about this. Think about what sort of stretched your thinking. Think about the tensions, both from the reading, the video, and what we're about to do. Think of where you can apply that learning, where you can apply that empathy, that curiosity. It may not be every day. It may not be this week. It may not be this month. But at some point, you're going to be tested by a student or students. And knowing the fuller story, knowing their fuller context will better equip you to make the right empathetic decisions to engage them in their education. So enough of that set up, because I really want to hear what you guys have to say to do this. We're going to do activity in stages. The first stage is a brainstorm, about 5 minutes. If you need more time, let me know. But imagine a child. So just what I said, this could be someone you've taught or are teaching. That's preferable. If you think you have a student you can sort of dig into, that would be great. But it could be a family member or a friend. It could even be yourself. Maybe you want to look at your 9-year-old self to see the different things that were in play. Any of those are fine. It's up to you. But you may want to go back to that Gonzalez Mania reading, specifically. I'm pulling it up real quick. I'm curious, can you guys see this, or do you just see do you guys see the chapter, or do you just see the PowerPoint?
Just the PowerPoint.
Just the PowerPoint. Interesting. Okay. So I've got the chapter up. It's not shared, but I wanted to find that exact page where she's talking about Bronfenbrenner. It looks like starts on page 5 and goes for the next couple. That's where she really looks at the different systems. So the micro system, what's very close to the student, usually it's like the family, maybe like a member of the clergy or a coach or somebody very close, someone that plays a very close role. And then as you move out, all the way out to time, this moment in time has a certain value and ethics associated with it. Your place, being in America, and then zooming in further, being in Trump America, then zooming into being in legal marijuana Colorado, and then zooming into your different communities. I mean, there's various things at play that could have an impact on the student. But what I want you to think about are lists of individuals, so people or organizations or relationships or experiences. You can keep going forever, values, events, whatever. And that's why I'm limiting this to 5 minutes, is because you could go on forever probably. But I want you to think of that student or that kid or yourself as a kid. Think of those individuals, organizations, relationships, experiences. You could even stretch to events, things like that impacted them. You could write this on a sticky note if you're sort of like a tactile person, or a piece of paper. Eventually, we need to move these around a little bit. So however you feel comfortable doing that, if you want to just rip up a piece of paper, I don't need to really see these, but I do want you to think about that if you have sticky notes. I was also thinking if you wanted to make like a document, put text boxes that maybe you can move around, you can do that as well. But as such, I just want a list of things that could impact a kid on a societal level. It could be very close to their family, and then zooming out. And then we're going to sort those in a minute. Any questions on this? It's a little bit confusing. Hopefully I've articulated it correctly. It's been a long day driving. I'm a bit brain dead. But think of a kid, think of the things that impact them for 5 minutes, and then we're going to do a sorting activity afterwards. Any clarifying questions from you? Cool. All right, let's take 5 minutes. I will let you know when those 5 minutes are up. It's currently 6:05 by my clock, so 6:10. Just make that list. This doesn't need to be perfect, doesn't need to be exhaustive. Cool. We'll come back in about 5 minutes. Got about 1 more minute. I'm doing this as well for a student I had before, so I'm ripping up some of my sheets, but we got about 1 more minute. All right, I'm going to stop us there. While you're, if you want to finish up the one you're working on or a couple more, that's fine. But you could go on forever with this type of work, thinking of things that impacts kids. All right, so the next activity I want you to do, tied to this. So you should have your thoughts. I already read mine up. I'm doing it for a student that I had who's, I'll talk about him in a minute. But I've got a large stack of things that impacted his life. I would like for you to think of a way to draw that ecological systems that makes sense to you. You could definitely just steal the one directly in the Gonzalez Mania book, which just kind of looks like a bullseye. The things that's closest to the kid is in the middle, and you're moving out, all the way to like social values and the looking at time. You could just steal that directly. I've got some from previous classes that I've done here. So you can see up here in this corner, they've done sort of just the bullseye. They made time sort of the cylinder part of what they drew. But then the students down here, they made a block of cheese, and somehow identified different parts of the cheese as the different systems at play in a student's life. I don't really care how creative you want to get, but if you want to look back at that Gonzalez Mania chapter, starting there on page 5, they outline the systems. I believe on page 6, there's actually a diagram of the systems. I would just like you to draw your own. And if you want to copy your own, that's fine. If you want to get creative with it, please do. If you want to use tech or use something other than drawing, that would be fine as well. But I want you to draw the systems, looking at those different systems that they explore, the microsystem, mesosystem, exosystem, macro, and chrono. Some of those are confusing. You don't need to memorize those words. This is more of an activity to see how it affects kids. Draw your system. It could be a piece of cheese. It could be Russian nesting dolls. It could be a pizza. It could be a bullseye, whatever you want it to be. It's up to you. But once you have those different systems, then start looking at some of those factors that you wrote down and start sorting those onto those systems. You might find that some belong in multiple places, and that's fine. You might not find a place for some of them, and that's fine. I want you to pay attention to some of those tensions. Is there any part of this that's hard? Is there any part of this that's confusing? Is there any part of this that can never end? You can just do it forever. I'm sure there are those parts. So to recap, draw the systems. I would probably be boring and just draw the same one is probably what I'm going to do, just that bullseye. And then start sorting the different things you wrote onto those systems. So with the student that I'm doing, his name was Hyro. He's probably the most difficult student I interacted with, but probably the most rewarding when we developed a relationship. I wrote down police trouble. He got in trouble with the law. He didn't have anyone else to take him to the police, and he asked me to take him, and that was tough. It was really, really tough. But I would probably put that maybe in the exo or macro system. That could be an argument. It can maybe go in the chrono system, which is time. At this point in time, as I'm sure you're all aware, if you're a person of color, you stand a much larger chance of running into police and having a negative experience with them. And I've got a bunch more that I'll sort as well, but I just kind of wanted to model a little bit how I was thinking about that. I would probably put in the macro system because it's local. It is local police. And to me, that's sort of that local, the local values, and it was a local run, and it can maybe even go in the exo system as well. But look back at that chapter, draw your systems, and then sort these out. I'll come back in about 15 minutes. Well, actually, that'll be right up against it. Let's see how far we got in 10 minutes. And then I would like to hear from a couple of you just how this activity went and what you learned. But try this for 10 minutes. Draw that system. If you want to do the bullseye, that's fine. And then sort the different things that you had written onto that, just to see all of the things that are at play in the student's life. So we'll come back in about 10 minutes. I'll give you a 1-minute warning again. Any questions on that? Great. Take about one more minute to finish. If you don't finish, that's fine. Just get as far as you can. Be thinking if you're willing to share. I'd love at least one person to share. Just kind of what you learned from the activity, some of your thoughts, takeaways. All right. Is there anyone who's willing to share? I mean, if you can show a visual, that's fine. If you just want to talk through it, that's perfectly great as well. But I would just like to know, what did you do? Was there anything that was really like sticky or hard or impossible to place, or could be placed many places? And just what did you think of the activity, looking at a student through that lens?
I can share. So I sort of made this weird iceberg thing because the reason I chose to make an iceberg rather than anything else was that this is probably impossible to see, so I'll just put it down. So the reason I chose to do that is because I have a student who is dealing with a lot of issues at home with abuse, and his one of his parents was in prison and just got out of prison, and he's been removed from that parent due to abuse. And he lives with his grandparents, but because his parent is out of prison now, there's been some issues where he's confronted him. And one of the things that's really tough is that, and the reason I made it an iceberg is that I know that information, but not everybody does. And so the language that gets used towards him is really important. And so there are things, the things that you see are like, okay, this is a kid at this school. I know that he has these siblings who are also in class, and I see what his behavior is, and I'm going to give him these consequences. And there's a lot of stuff that people just don't understand, you just don't know. And so there was an issue with a paraprofessional today that she like used some language that was like really traumatizing for him, and he was sort of had to remove himself from class and go home. And so that was really hard. And so I drew an iceberg because there's a lot of stuff that we just don't know. And there are a lot of levels of like understanding that there is ways to understand it, but it's really hard to get there. And it's hard for him, and it's hard for teachers, and it's hard for even parents to really understand what he's going through. And so that's what I did.
Do you care if I ask you a personal question? I mean, like, it's not personal to you, but what do you do with that? So you've heard this, right? You know this information. It's you know it, maybe somebody else doesn't. But like, where's your head thinking? Like, this probably isn't a problem that you can go out and solve tomorrow, right? So how are you thinking about it as an educator, thinking about what you can actually impact with this?
So I think the first step is to realize that like my class and the work that I'm asking him to do is ultimately not the most important thing in his life, and that his like mental stability is a lot more important. And so I think that one of the things that I'm trying to provide for him is just love, and to just sort of give him this sense of forgiveness, because I think he doesn't really understand, like, his parent is his parent, and like it's very hard for him to understand like I can't be with my parent because your parent is your parent, and he's like 11. So I think what I'm trying to do is give as much forgiveness and grace towards him as I possibly can. And he knows, like he's told me this, and you know, when he knows when he needs to step out, and I trust. And I think another thing that I'm trying to work on with him is trust. So like forming a relationship of trust with him, where like I trust that if he needs to step out of the classroom, he's going to tell me that, and he's not going to tell me that if that's not the case. And so today, I think that trust was really broken because of what happened with the paraprofessional, and it's not her fault at all, because she just didn't know. But I think that there's like, it's all going back to that idea of trust, and I'm trying to approach it with like, I'm going to give you what you need and give you the love and care that you deserve in whatever way that I can. And ultimately that might mean that like my role as an educator is not really to be your social studies teacher, but to try to help you get to a point that's comfortable for you mentally. And also I'm just working with the counselors a lot, you know, like I'm not a counselor, and he's worked with them before and continues to. So using those resources as much as I can.
That's awesome. Great. And I hope like some schools would say, you know, leading with that grace and forgiveness is a slippery slope because it can lower expectations. And that could be a thing, but I hope you stick to your guns, and I hope no one gives you flack for that. Specifically in this situation, in this context, I think what you're doing makes a lot of sense, and I think most folks would agree with you. So thanks so much for sharing that. I really appreciate that. All right, so my timing is off. I want to make sure that I get this done more or less on time. So I'm going to make one quick change, but I wanted to look ahead just a minute. These are sort of the logistics, and I share this each week. So I'm going to give you an option for how you want to complete your reflection. I'm going to talk about that last. So I'm going to move over to the PLC. The next PLC is next week. That's our last in this series of 3. After that one, we're just going to meet the first Tuesday of every month. So it'll get off this very frequent meeting. I like to, you know, form relationships. So I think seeing each other frequently early is good. But then we'll go to once a month, and that September 5th will be the first to start that. And that's all on the syllabus. I'll email you the pre-work for that one tomorrow. Haiku, I've put you on the first like major module. It's called literacy and content areas. It focuses on before, during, and after reading strategies. It focuses on some writing strategies. There are some student talk strategies that were part of that. I've taken those out. If you really want some student talk resources, I can share that with you. I just didn't want to inundate you too much with that type of stuff right now. Those are the due dates there. You can see none of them are due before our next PLC. There is one due September 6th, which is Wednesday. But I just wanted to let you know that's open. If you want to poke around in that, that's cool. Athena, thank you for doing those reflections last week. I think there were about 8 in there. If you think you did one, but it's not, I don't acknowledge that it's there, I haven't commented on it. It might be because you didn't share it with admin. I'm the admin or the group. Maybe check that if you think you have turned it in, but it's not showing up for me in some reason. We do have a couple more videos that are on the syllabus due in September, but again, we'll have time to talk about that at next PLC. Or if you want to reach out to me if you're nervous about that, that's fine. Okay, so for the reflection tonight, one of 2 things. I really loved what Eliza shared. It makes me sad that I didn't time this as well as I could have to hear all of your share-outs. So you could elect to either just summarize what you have, or if you want to take a picture of it and sort of give me some context around what this picture is that you created, that would be cool. You can definitely do that. I also want to be a little bit actionable as well. So in the last slide in the PowerPoint, which I put the link to in Zoom, I can also share this as well. There's a link to a folder of resources, and I've already got that open, so I'm just going to pop over. Can you all still see that? Do you see a Google folder? Do you still see the slides? Google folder? Great, cool. This resource exploration, I think is what that links to. So these are all students from a master's class that I've had before and other teachers that I really respect. It's some ideas on how they do this work of engaging families and communities in the work. So here's like a math night resource that was really cool. Here are some implementation maps. In the master's class I teach, students look at this, what you just looked at, what we looked at for like 15 minutes, students look at for a complete semester, and develop like implementation maps around how they're going to engage family community. And a bunch of them are here, and that could spark ideas for you. There are some more academic readings if you like to read that well, if that's the way you like to learn. There are a bunch more readings in here. Some may look familiar, like Moll's Funds of Knowledge or Epstein. Some may look less familiar, but there's a ton of readings about this type of stuff. There's some videos, there's some websites. So there's a ton of resources here. And if you feel like, I did this PLC, I did this little activity, but I want to know what I can do. What can I plan? This is probably what you want to do. If you really enjoy digging deep into that student study, you could share it much like Eliza shared it in your own words. What did you learn from that? What is your student's case study, and how do you plan to navigate that? So that choice is yours. You'll see in the PowerPoint that I had you just do the resource deal. And if you choose to do the resource deal, sorry, I didn't mention this, there's a resource note catcher there. And it's basically just what resource did you look at? What sparked your interest to look at it? And what did you get from it? There are like 3 of those. If you want to do this activity but have a different output, you can certainly do that as well. But I just want your thoughts either about the resources or about the activity we just did. A short paragraph is fine. A picture is fine. A piece of art, a podcast, whatever you would like to do is fine. Just your thoughts about one of those 2 areas. And I would like that by next PLC. So don't do it tonight if you're tired. Don't do it tomorrow if you're tired. Just find some time before that next PLC. So I made a quick change there. Hopefully it didn't confuse people. Any questions about what I'm expecting in terms of the post work, the reflection work, or any questions in general about what we've done?
Where is this PowerPoint so that we can get that link and
Cool.
stuff?
It is. I shared it via the Zoom Slack. And let's see. How do you get to the Zoom Slack? When I'm sharing my screen, it's hard to do that. 1 second. Or the Zoom chat. I said Slack. We use Slack. It's a chat function. Sorry. On the lower bar there's a chat, and hopefully everyone will see. If you click that, it'll like pop up a little window. You guys don't have that? Okay. Maybe that's just because I am the host. I will email this out to you right now, right after we get off this call.
Thank you. That was my question too.
Awesome. Any other questions, takeaways, comments? Any good things you really want to share? Cool. I'll stay on the call in case you have any logistical questions about Aspire or teaching or anything you'd like to share. Otherwise, you can jump off the call. I will email this out in the next few minutes, this slide. Otherwise, I will see you next Tuesday, which is September 5th. If you have any questions, please reach out about Edthena or Haiku or anything else. Please stay on the call or email me, call me. I'm here to help. Thanks very much.
Hey, Dane.
Yeah.
I just had a couple of questions. So that Aspire class introduction, is that just a pre-recorded one that I've got to go into and watch?
Yeah, that first activity, Intro to Haiku, is just some videos showing you how Haiku works. They might reference uploading like a worksheet or something. You don't need to upload any worksheets on that. I found that redundant. It's silly.
Okay, and what about activity 2 for the Haiku, because that one was due on the 23rd?
Yeah, so the people that have been in the program for a while, I had them complete it so I understood their context. Given that I've visited you and talked to you at length and understand your context, I feel like I have a good feel for that. If you wanted to give it a look, if there was anything in there that you felt was like really important to share for me to understand you and your context, that would be fine as well. But since I visited you and we've talked at length, I feel like we're all right.
Okay, all right. I think that's it. I'm going through the other stuff and getting that all filled out and everything. So that was pretty much the only 2 questions I